Hello and welcome to episode 30 of Touchline Talk with Odds Changer. As usual, I'm joined by the one and only football writer and broadcaster Dean Jones to discuss all the latest news and gossip from the world of football. Domestic season is now over, Dean. So Chelsea are now the champions of Europe, and I think they're getting plans ready to try and become the champions of England, it seems, with their transfer strategy well and truly underway. And it seems Roman Abramovich is taking a big hand in these discussions as well. I know you're all across this with the Romelu Lukaku story, with Roman Abramovich personally driving this move as well. So what's your latest take on Chelsea's pursuit of their former striker, Romelu Lukaku?
Yeah, well, they're definitely in for him. Not going to be straightforward in terms of getting him, but I think it's interesting that they've gone even as far as they have. You know, they've accelerated this quite quickly to try and get a feel of things before he heads into the Euros, and Abramovich is taken, quite a heavy say in it all. And I've written that he's driving the deal, and it's pretty rare that Abramovich gets this involved in a transfer. Obviously, he always has a say and wants to know what's going on and gives his opinions, but he wants Lukaku back at Chelsea. He's spoken to Thomas Tuchel, and he's guaranteed him that, you know, I'll make sure that our squad is even stronger for next season, because let's face it, winning the Premier League is in some ways harder than winning the Champions League, you know. So they need a stronger squad, and they obviously want a new striker with Tammy Abraham and Olivier Giroud set to leave. And they've wanted Lukaku back before. They tried to get him in 2017. He was open to it, and it just happened that Mourinho made a phone call himself and managed to persuade Lukaku to go to Man United. And you know, Lukaku's name was kind of dragged through the mud over that period, and people made fun of him a lot and didn't think he was that great, to be honest. And he's gone to Inter Milan. He's had a 30-goal season. He's won the league. He loved playing under Antonio Conte, and now, because of the financial issues there, the potential of players leaving, he's got to consider what happens next. It's not like he might stay at Inter Milan. It's not definite that he's leaving at this stage, but Chelsea sounded him out. He's interested in it. Let's just see how far it can go from here. But I think it's interesting that a return is on the cards. It was 10 years ago this summer that he joined Chelsea initially. Never really got a fair chance, did he? In that little spell he had over 3 years. Spent more time on loan than anything else. But this time, it's fair to say he's a different player and a different man.
Yeah, very much so. A different player, different man. More mature now as well, Dean. He was very young when he initially made that move to Chelsea. And I think in those 3 seasons at the club, he only made 15 appearances for the Blues as well. So if he was to end up back at Stamford Bridge, they're going to get a very different player that maybe the Chelsea fans didn't see when he first arrived at the club as well. But reports in Italy suggesting, Dean, that Inter may be looking at other players to possibly sell here to try and keep Lukaku. Talk of Hakimi, the Moroccan defender, possibly being on the move again. He's a Chelsea target as well. And from what I've heard, Chelsea have done their background work on Hakimi, possibly to come in and play at right wing back or even left wing back, which he's played for Inter Milan as well. What's your take on possibly Chelsea's interest in Hakimi?
I think it's there. I'm not convinced they need him, unless, you know, Reece James is going to be playing centre half on the right side of that defence, and they're going to put Hakimi at right wing back. I don't think they particularly need him. I think it's true that they've been offered the player. I know that Hakimi is, if he does leave Inter Milan, he wants to come to the Premier League. He's had it in his sights for quite a while. Even before he joined Inter Milan, he was linked quite heavily, I think, with Arsenal as well.
Yep.
And he's totally open to the idea of coming to the Premier League. I mean, Chelsea have got the best fullbacks, the best wing-backs, arguably, at the moment in the Premier League. You know, the way they've used Reece James and Azpilicueta, the way they've used Chilwell and Alonso, do they need Hakimi? Probably not. But I guess if you're saying, well, this is what we need this strength in depth across the squad in order to compete in Europe and the Premier League, if that's what they're looking at, then fair enough. And obviously, like, Azpilicueta is getting towards the end of his time, and, you know, arguably maybe as Alonso is too. So I can see why the link's there, and it's probably an easier way for Inter to lose a player without losing all of their momentum of last season than losing Lukaku, because that's the big problem, isn't it? You lose Lukaku, you're losing 30 goals from last season. There's already concern that Lautaro Martinez might go as well. They're trying to talk him into an extension on his contract. So yeah, there's definitely legs in it for sure.
Yeah, Chelsea ready to profit from Inter's problems, it seems, with Lukaku and possibly Hakimi making their move to Stamford Bridge as well. Obviously, there's a few positions I think Thomas Tuchel is looking to strengthen, maybe 2 or 3 signings this summer just to make that squad even better than it is right now and make a real challenge for the Premier League title against Manchester City next season. Obviously, the name of Declan Rice has appeared again in Chelsea's radar, Dean. Obviously, we all know Frank Lampard was desperate to sign the England international last summer, and that move didn't come off in the end for Chelsea or Lampard. And I think a lot of people sort of held that against Lampard, that he spent too much time on trying to sign Declan Rice, and it almost cost him his job in the end in some respects as well. So what do you think? Thomas Tuchel, it seems, is an admirer of Declan Rice. Any chances of this move happening this summer?
It's funny because obviously Lampard wanted Rice and wasn't that keen on Havertz, and Havertz has just scored the winning goal in a Champions League final. So pretty much sums up how things went for Lampard, doesn't it? Is there a chance of Declan Rice? I'd say a small chance. I'm not 100% convinced Declan Rice is going to leave this summer. I think he's got his eyes open to what could happen. I think the people working for him are definitely sounding out clubs to see who is genuinely interested. I think Chelsea want to be kept in the loop, but it's going to cost a lot of money. West Ham heading into Europe, for the first time in a long time. Yep. He's the captain. He's been the poster boy of that run of that season. He'd have the chance to lead them into that. It's a really tough choice to walk away from West Ham right now. And obviously, he came up with Chelsea. It's quite funny at the moment that the two players they're chasing, Lukaku and Declan Rice, they've already had before. They've let them both out. But yeah, they are interested. Depends, I guess, what West Ham are actually going to insist on terms of fee and if there's better value out there. Because I've heard that, Marco Verratti, for example, is somebody that they're interested in. That might be from the Tuchel end of things and might make more sense. There's a lot of interest in Declan Rice as well, so you're not going to get a free run at him. You're going to have Man United, Man City, and probably Liverpool also competing with you for that, which is going to make sure that the price remains high. It's going to be a really difficult one, I think. But I guess the one thing that could help Chelsea here is about to go into an England camp and be around these players and taste
Champions League medals.
Yeah, they're going to be talking about their Champions League medals, talking about what it's like and that. And it doesn't take a lot for you to have your head turned. And if the offer comes on the back of that, you think, yeah, that's the life I want. Never mind this little jaunt with West Ham into Europe. I want the real thing. So we'll have to see how it plays out, I think, over the next few weeks.
Yeah, it's going to be a big summer ahead for Declan Rice. If he goes to the Euros with England and has a successful tournament as well, his price tag is just going to be driven up even higher as well. And we all know West Ham are desperate to keep the midfielder as well. So, yeah, I think we're going to have another summer of transfer speculation surrounding the future of Declan Rice. Just another name, Dean, that Chelsea have been linked with and possible signing is Donnarumma on a free transfer, possibly. Contract talks with AC Milan have broken down. It seems like the Italian international will be leaving the San Siro this summer. Chelsea have been in the market for a goalkeeper with doubts surrounding the long-term future of Kepa and even also Mendy, whether he's going to be the number one there for Thomas Tuchel as well. Donnarumma on a free would surely make a lot of sense if you are going to try and improve your goalkeeping options.
It does, yeah, but you've also got to bear in mind that his agent's Mino Raiola, and there's going to be a hefty sum heading his way as well if that's to happen. I mean, I think part of the problem that his talks have broken down at AC Milan are that not only over the terms of his own contract and the money that he wanted per year, but also the money that Raiola wanted for him to go and sign the deal. That's what I've heard is partly to blame for this breakdown. I think Milan are gutted to be losing him, but they can't be seen to be paying out extraordinary amounts of money for a player that was already their own player in terms of agent fees. That's my understanding of the situation. And so I think that poses the question, would Chelsea be willing to go down that route? And I mean, maybe they are, because Chelsea have been touching base over this all year since January. They've wanted to be kept in the loop over what Donnarumma was doing. They've always been open to the fact that Edouard Mendy wasn't necessarily their long-term number one. He just came in as competition for Kepa and has emerged as the number one. Kepa, obviously, they need to get off the wage bill if that's going to happen as well. They can't have three goalkeepers like that of that level at the club. So I do think Chelsea are in there, but I also think PSG and Juventus are still in that race as well for Donnarumma. So there's a lot to consider from both parties, really.
Yeah, I think there's one thing for sure, Dean. Chelsea are going to have another busy summer transfer window. I think they were the heaviest spenders last summer when under Frank Lampard, and it looks like Roman Abramovich is going to dig deep into those deep pockets of his to fund another transfer spree for Chelsea and to try and close the gap on Manchester City in the Premier League at least. So big summer for Chelsea. Also now a big summer for Everton, which I don't think a lot of people might have expected after the sudden departure of Carlo Ancelotti. Back to Real Madrid for a second time. Ancelotti, who managed Real for 2 years between 2013 and 2015, has decided to leave Goodison Park to return to Real and succeed Zinedine Zidane at the Bernabeu as well. So that means Everton are now searching for their 6th permanent manager in 5 years. I don't think many people saw this one coming probably a couple of weeks ago, Dean. I thought everybody was thinking Carlo Ancelotti's maybe building something there at Everton, the move to a new stadium coming up as well. A bit of a shock for all Evertonians, this one.
Yeah, it is a bit of a shock, and obviously they'll be disappointed because they thought maybe they had some stability at last, and it's not the case. It's funny, I wrote a piece on Friday just talking about Real Madrid, and right as part of it and the whole Zidane exit, somebody said to me, like, we're pretty sure that the club already know who's coming in. We just can't figure out who they've spoken to. And it makes sense, I guess. Like Ancelotti, of course, they've turned back to him. They're always looking for a safe pair of hands, aren't they, at Real Madrid, if they can, and they've probably found one there. So I don't totally blame Ancelotti for leaving Everton for Real Madrid. I guess you've got to look at it like that. Like, what would most people do? They'd probably make the same decision. What's the ceiling on what he could have done at Everton? I don't know. But it's a really difficult choice now again for Everton. Like, what path are they going to go down next in terms of like building something here? They basically have a rebuild every 18 months, it feels like, and they go and spend a load of players, get a new manager, and then they're back to square one. You're left with layers and layers of players, aren't you, from all different regimes, and they've got to be all knitted together. And it's just frustrating, really, that they show signs of brilliance, and you think, hang on, this is a sign of a side that could compete for the top 4. And then it just doesn't happen for whatever reason. So like, I've seen Steven Gerrard linked and things like this, but I'm not convinced.
I'll take your money on that bet, Dean, if you have a bet on that one. So I'm not confident that Steven Gerrard at 100-1 will not be the next Everton manager as well. But just looking at the betting for the job, we've got Nuno Espirito Santo, who's obviously out of work at the minute after leaving Wolves. He's the current favourite at 11-8. Eddie Howe, second favourite, 5-2. He's a boyhood Everton fan. And obviously he's still looking for a job after turning down the Celtic job. There's a bit of a clamour for this one, Dean. Rafa Benitez, the ex-Liverpool manager, 6-1, still lives on Merseyside, and a lot of people suggesting that if Everton did come calling, he would be interested in that job. And then we've got the name of David Moyes in there. He's 10-1 to come back to Goodison Park after a successful spell there before when he took Everton into Europe as well. Where do you think Everton are going to go here? Because it was a real coup landing Ancelotti in the first place. They thought they had their man for at least 3 seasons. He's only lasted 18 months. There were signs of improvement here, but where do you think Everton need to go if they are to try and break into that top 4? Who would be the right man for them?
I don't think it'll be David Moyes. He's about to sign a new contract at West Ham. I think it's a 3-year deal as well. So I don't see that David Moyes is coming back. I think Nuno's probably an interesting one that's opened up. I guess you've got to remember the way that Everton have been making transfer deals and the likes, like the recruitment strategy that they're taking, and whether Nuno fits into that. I think whichever manager comes in, they're dealing with certain agents and things like that, and you've got to start figuring out where the pieces fall into place here. And it's likely that a manager comes from a certain angle, if you like, and it's going to be in line with where their recruitment comes. I know this sounds all a bit mysterious, but if you follow my line of thinking, people like Richarlison at the football club, and they'll be looking at their next move and say, look at who their agents are, look at who potentially might come into the club. And I think that that's the path to be looking at the moment. I don't know who you see as the favourite here. I think it's really hard to read this, especially as it's come about so suddenly. But Nuno, I don't know if that makes sense to me, to be honest with you.
Yeah, it's a strange one. I just think obviously he's been linked. Obviously we know his ties with Jorge Mendes as well. There's such an influential agent that Mendes is, whether he could get Nuno into that job. But he's out of work. He did a great job at Wolves. That cycle has come to an end as well. I don't know. I think there'll be some interesting shouts in this one. I've heard a little shout that the Porto manager Sergio Conceição could be a real interesting option here for Everton. I think he is keen on coming to the Premier League at some point as well. He's done a good job in Portugal as well. He was linked with the Wolves job, but I think he's not really interested in that one. But I think if Everton were to maybe firm up their interest and come calling, I think there's a real possibility that we could see him taking over from Carlo Ancelotti at the Goodison Park helm. But it's an interesting one as well. You've got Frank Lampard, who's obviously out of work as well. He's 16-1 for this job. Well, Graham Potter, who's been mentioned with the Tottenham job, who's done a really impressive work at Brighton. He's also in the betting at 12-1 as well. But yeah, I think it's key for Everton that they find the right man now and sort of try and build on what Ancelotti's tried to do over the last 18 months.
Yeah, exactly that. I think what you're saying there is really interesting, and I think that we should keep our eyes open to options that aren't the most familiar names to us here in the UK, but have been, making a name for themselves abroad. Because that does sound actually like the kind of path that I think will probably be a good idea, and something I could see easily opening up. So yeah, I think don't really look at the most obvious candidates. I think with Everton, I think that they'll probably be thinking a little smarter than people might be willing to initially think.
Yeah, I don't think Rafa will go down too well with Everton fans after what he said before in the past about Everton.
No. It's a lot of money to get Rafa Benitez as well. He's one of the most expensive managers around. I'm not saying that Everton aren't willing to spend money on managers, because they are. But I think with the history attached to Rafa and that huge amount outlay and the risk that would be attached with how long he would actually last in the contract, it just doesn't seem one to me that could get off the ground.
Yeah, we all know the Everton owner, Farhad Mojri. He's been very ambitious in his plans for Everton as well. He's obviously put his money where his mouth is as well. I think over the last few seasons, Everton are the biggest net spenders in the Premier League as well. So they pulled off a major coup landing Ancelotti. So I wouldn't rule out something else, that they could go there and get a manager that we maybe haven't heard being linked with Everton. So I'm sure Everton will have plans in place to try and replace Ancelotti, but he's going to be a tough act to replace, I think. Very popular with the Everton fans as well, up until his departure as well. So big summer ahead for Everton to try and get things right on the managerial front. Sticking on the managerial merry-go-round, Dean, obviously the Crystal Palace job still available as well since the departure of Roy Hodgson there. It's the usual suspects who are also linked with the Everton job who are mentioned in the betting for this job. We've got Nuno favoured for that job as well, so he's doing all right for himself. Favoured for two jobs. I'm not sure how he's going to do both jobs, but yeah, he's 11-10 to maybe take over Palace. I think there's been talks held between Nuno and Palace's director of football, Dougie Friedman, over the last few days, and they're quite hopeful that they can get this deal done, probably before the news of Everton's vacancy became available as well. We've also got Eddie Howe, second favourite here again, 5-2. Steve Cooper, the Swansea manager, 5-1. Frank Lampard, 6-1. Sean Dyche, 6-1. And Valérien Ismaël, 10-1. I don't know what you've heard. I know Steve Cooper's had 2 interviews for this job, so he's definitely in the thoughts of the Palace hierarchy. But I think all sort of signs seem to point that Nuno is the man that they want to go for right now, but could come down to a straight battle between Palace and Everton for his services, really.
Yeah, it's interesting. Look, I think the owners, the American owners, are really keen on Steve Cooper, and they're kind of driving that end of things. I think there are people on the ground at Crystal Palace that still aren't 100% convinced. I mean, you've had 2 interviews, I've had 4, so like somewhere in between that, maybe he's had 3. But he's definitely been in regular dialogue, and Palace have been looking into it. And I was told that, to be honest, even if Swansea had been relegated, that he was open. Even if Swansea were promoted, he would be willing to take the job because it's such a jump. So he's still in the frame, I believe. But I think that Nuno is definitely an interesting one for the club to consider, given that they weren't fully convinced that that's the path to go down. Nuno obviously has held talks now with Palace, and does seem probably more in fitting with what I would have expected them to do, and the Becca Hodgson might be considered a little bit safer in terms of the pedigree and the type of player he might attract, and the agents he's attached to and things like that. So I think that might make more sense to me. I don't have any live information right now, but yeah, the fact he's held talks on the back of them speaking to Steve Cooper obviously shows that they're not fully convinced that they were on the right path anyway.
Yeah, probably the thing that stands Nuno in good factor is that he has got Premier League experience, and he's been with Wolves now for the last couple of years in the Prem, and maybe attracting players. He might have a better chance with, obviously, his ties with certain agents as well, that they might be able to attract very high-profile European players to Crystal Palace this summer to strengthen the squad. As we all know, that Palace squad is needing a rebuild with so many players set to leave the club at the end of their contracts next month as well. Just staying on the managerial merry-go-round things, there's so many things going on the managerial front. Mauricio Pochettino and Spurs, obviously still going on. He's still the favourite to return to the club to take over from Jose Mourinho as well. Obviously, he was mentioned in connection with the Real Madrid job as well, Pochettino, which obviously has now been taken by Carlo Ancelotti. PSG very keen to keep hold of Pochettino, and they've extended a clause in his contract to extend his contract, so they've taken that up. What's your take on this one? Can you see Poch actually returning to Spurs?
It's really, really difficult for this to happen. They are definitely pursuing it, and they have been over the past week. But in order for it to happen, it's going to take Pochettino basically to quit PSG. That's where we're at, as I understand it. Like, I know PSG have played down the fact that Pochettino's asked to leave. They say that they intend for him to stay and do good things, and they're happy with him. But from what I'm hearing, they do know that he would like to leave. He has been frustrated by the working practices that are in place. Shouldn't really have come to us as a surprise to him, because that's why Thomas Tuchel got so annoyed when he was manager of PSG. And it can't be that different, to be honest, to the frustrations he had at Tottenham under Daniel Levy. I'm not sure if he's forgotten about some of the issues that he had with Daniel Levy in terms of transfers and stuff, but it wasn't that different to what he's been experiencing at PSG. It's a strange approach for Tottenham to take, to sack Pochettino and now look to bring him back and shell out even more money to get him in. I think the only thing that you could say here is that Daniel Levy is having a very rare moment where he's basically admitting he was wrong to get rid of him. This might be a brand new thing for him. It's not something he usually goes back on, is it? But I think he realises that he was onto a good thing. And I think one thing that nobody's really talked about so far and is worth thinking about is that maybe it takes Pochettino to come back for Harry Kane to also stay. That could be a factor here. I think that if Poch was to come back, then it would be that thing that Kane was more willing to stay at Tottenham, and it might even be the major thing that keeps him there. Obviously, Tottenham don't want to sell him either way, but it might just be that you have a happy player there for the next year rather than an unhappy player if it's Pochettino in charge. So there's a lot of factors, but it's going to be extremely difficult for Pochettino to get back into that Tottenham role. And at the moment, they haven't really been pursuing other avenues as hard as they probably should have been, because Antonio Conte is there right now for the taking.
Yeah.
In my eyes, they should be going for it because he's a proven winner. But they risk, if they keep going on the Pochettino route, they risk him being snapped up by somebody else, I guess. They do like Conte, and obviously he'll take a lot of money and he'll need convincing over the future plans in terms of transfers and keeping the squad together. But look, if Pochettino is going to prove that hard to get out of PSG, then they need to move on quickly.
Yeah, they're going to have some alternative lined up if the Pochettino deal is too hard to do in the end for Tottenham to bring him back, although all the fans would love that. And as you said, Dean, I think a driving factor could be if Pochettino comes back to Spurs, that increases their chances of keeping Harry Kane, because Kane's a big admirer of Pochettino. They both get on very well, and it's a better chance that Kane will stay at the club this summer if Pochettino is back as manager. Talking of clubs with alternatives, it takes us nicely on to Celtic. They thought they had their manager all done and dusted with Eddie Howe. It was all expected to be probably announced last week until the news that Eddie Howe had turned down the job at Celtic Park as well, which left a lot of people surprised and a bit upset with how long Celtic had waited for Eddie Howe to take up the job and then to finally turn it down as well. The man in the frame now seems to be the former Australia coach, Ange Postecoglou, who obviously not a lot of people might know a lot about, Dean. He's managed the Socceroos in a World Cup 2014. He's now currently managing in Japan with Yokohama F Marinos, and who are part of the City Group, Manchester City's owners as well. So he's an experienced coach as well, but for Celtic fans, I think it's just another letdown for them in what has been a year to forget, really, missing out on Eddie Howe.
Yeah, I mean, it's not going to raise morale or hope much, is it? Unfortunately, however good a coach he actually is, like the problem he's going to have is if things don't start well, then there's no reason for the Celtic fans to believe in him or stick by him, because there's no feeling there towards him that's already existed, and there's no faith in him because they're not going to know anything that he's done in the past. From Celtic's point of view, I can understand why they would go down this route. It's a lot cheaper than a lot of the other people that were put into the role. And it's, if things don't go well, then they're not going to think twice, I don't think, about getting rid of him and moving on to somebody else and having somebody else to blame for the mess that the club are in, is that if they do hit a new low. So it's not a complete surprise to me. I think that Eddie Howe, there were obviously issues there that just didn't fit with him. The way he wanted things structured, the people he wanted on board with him, it all just didn't come together as he had imagined, and he's fallen away. A big blow to Celtic, I think. Yeah. Bigger blow to the fans who thought that they had a plan there and a vision, that they could see at least some hope there. And now I really don't know what you can expect from the next season, but it doesn't seem likely that they're going to close the gap much on Rangers, if from what we've seen so far.
Yeah, massive summer ahead for them, as you said. Finished 25 points behind Rangers this season. Rangers obviously went through the whole league campaign unbeaten as well, so they're only going to go from strength to strength under Steven Gerrard, you would think. But Postecoglou, obviously, he's come with a decent reputation. I think in Australia he's done well with some club teams, and obviously he did well with the national team as well. But the thing is, for him, is he must be thinking himself that he's a second choice. He's a fallback option, with Eddie Howe being the main target initially for Celtic as well. So where does that leave him? Does he thinking, I'm second choice here, they didn't really want me, so he's going to have to come in here and hit the ground running, really?
Yeah, I mean, I guess the only way is up from a feeling like that. I mean, from what I'm told, he's quite a grumpy guy anyway, and he doesn't ever come across very happy, even when things are going well for him. So
perfect Scottish for the Scottish press. I love him.
Maybe he'll fit in well. But yeah, it's. I guess for him, it's a platform to prove everybody wrong, isn't it? I mean, that's the way that he'll look at it. He'll be confident in himself, and he must have good methods that have worked for him in the past to even be considered for this job. So I can't claim to know a lot about, the way that he's had his teams playing and stuff in the past. But this is an opportunity for him, and it wouldn't be the first time that we've seen managers come in from nowhere and prove everybody wrong. Arsene Wenger did it at Arsenal a long time ago. Maybe this is Celtic's version.
This could be Celtic's version, coming from Japan, where Arsene Wenger also came from as a relative unknown, and did such a great job there. Yeah, I think Celtic would be delighted if he turned out to be the second Arsene Wenger. So they need somebody to try and raise morale and rebuild that squad on and off the pitch, really, and to try and make a better challenge up against Rangers next season as well. Another team who've got a big challenge ahead of them is Sheffield United. They've appointed former Watford and Fulham manager Slaviša Jokanović as their new manager to replace Chris Wilder. Immediate task, Dean, will be to get the Blades back in the Premier League after a disastrous campaign this year for them, following the success of the previous season when they finished in 9th place in the table. You know all about Jokanović. Being a Fulham fan, he did a great job there before obviously leaving. He's won promotion before with Watford and Fulham. He seems to be the right man for Sheffield United to get them back into the promised land.
Yeah, it's a brilliant appointment. Jokanović will go in there. The Sheffield United fans have got a lot to look forward to. For Fulham fans, it was the best couple of years ever watching Fulham, to be honest. Some of the football we had us playing in the end, and the way that Fulham were promoted was just a joy. So yeah, there's a lot to look forward to for Sheffield United. He'll have them playing attacking football, possession football. He builds unity. He's a great leader. He's a good talker. Fulham fans are gutted, really, that he's gone to a club that's going to be a rival for promotion next season, because, this is such a good appointment that I would have. Sheffield United almost nailed on to come straight back up. And meanwhile, there's obviously so much uncertainty at Fulham that you wouldn't have minded him coming back, but it was never really going to happen with the current ownership. So, yeah, a great move, and let's see how he can restructure the squad a little bit now, because he's already looking to get one or two things done.
Yeah, he'll want a decent transfer budget. I'm sure that was part of his talks when he was talking to the Sheffield United owners, that he'd be looking at some funds there to try and improve that squad to build a team capable of winning promotion back to the Premier League. He's obviously been linked with his old Fulham players straight away, Tom Kearney being one of them, who obviously had a really injury-hit campaign this season in the Premier League, didn't play many games. Is that a move you could possibly see happening?
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, he is interested in him. He was one of the first things I'm told that he went into the club, and when they asked about players he'd be interested in, and Kearney was one of the first names he spoke about. Obviously, he was a big part of the Fulham promoted team, and he was the captain. And Jokanović got him playing really well at times in the role that he had him in. Look, Tom Kearney has had a lot of injuries. And he's Fulham's captain, so there's a lot to weigh up there. You know, I'm not sure how you even value him right now. He's still got at least 2, maybe 3 years left on his contract. So Fulham wouldn't want to sell him because he's the captain and he's been there for a long time, and they'll be hoping they can get a full season out of him. But on the other side of it, they'll be, well, how are these injuries? Like, how much is he actually going to play, and can we take that money and reinvest it somewhere else? But then there's obviously the risk of letting go to Sheffield United, and he runs the show next season.
Strengthen a rival.
Yeah, so it's a really tough call. But yeah, Jokanović definitely keen on it. I don't think he's going to get loads of money, to be honest, from what I've heard. He'll get a reasonable budget, but it's not huge, because I suggested to someone, well, will he go for Mitrovic as well then? And said he hasn't got that kind of budget. You think Kearney and Mitrovic are basically Fulham's 2 top earners, and he couldn't go and take both of those. But one of them, yeah. So if Kearney falls through, maybe we see that he then turns to Mitrovic instead.
Yeah, he's going back to his old club for a bit of shopping at Harrods, Mr. Jokanović as well. But I think he'd probably look to generate a bit of money from sales as well, Dean. We all know Sander Berg being linked with a number of Premier League clubs, the likes of Arsenal, Aston Villa, even Liverpool, Manchester City have been mentioned with the Norwegian. I think maybe a bit of interest maybe in Baldock and Ollie McBurney possibly as well, who's had a real disappointing campaign. They spent big money on him. It hasn't really worked out for him, and he's had a few issues off the field as well. So maybe a new challenge is needed for him as well. So if he can generate money from sales, that might strengthen his hand in the transfer market as well to bring in the signings that he wants to.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Sander Berg, I guess, would bring in potentially the most, but he's obviously had this injury, which we'll have to see how that would get through him on medicals. You know, people are going to obviously have different varied kind of levels that they look at and worry about and don't worry about. But that was quite a substantial injury that he had. And I think there will be clubs slightly concerned about paying too much money for him without seeing him play for a prolonged period of time. So that is a risk, and it will affect his value. But ultimately, you know, the player's got a decision to make now, and it might be that he's excited about the fact of, you know, getting back to playing and being promoted and going up that way, that than having a fresh start here, because he's part of that club. They've helped him rehabilitate, and he never really got going, did he?
No. But yeah, a top player on his day, and as you said, if Sheffield United can keep hold of him, you got to be making them probably your promotion favourites next year to get back to the Premier League as well. But exciting times for all Blades fans out there that Slaviša Jokanović is the new man to replace who they thought as the Messiah, Chris Wilder, as well. So interesting times ahead for Sheffield United. Okay, that's us here for another week on Touchline Talk. We'll be back next week for more news and gossip and insight into the latest goings on in the world of football.